What is the best thing that has ever happened to you because of curiosity? Story 1, I was on duty in the military, and I heard a noise behind a tent at about 300 in the morning. I was curious, so I went to go see what it was. There was a guy on top of a big tent with a noose around his neck trying to hang himself. I managed to get him down before jumped. No one was injured. Story 2, I went to Gen Con in 2000. It was the last day of the convention, and I decided to walk around the exhibition hall one last time, just to see if I had missed any interesting games during the week. As I'm walking, I see this old man sitting behind a table, and he had a small crowd gathered around him. Initially, I didn't think much of it. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I happened to see his con badge. It was Gary Gigax. I love DD, love this game. I needed to say thank you, so I got in line. Mind you, this was when 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons had just been released, so everyone was getting their player's handbook signed by him. The gentleman in front of me had his book covered with signatures. The entire inside of the cover was filled, so when it came time for Mr. Gigax to sign, there was very little room. Somehow he managed to squeeze, and it's still my game. Gary Gigax. I was mortified I couldn't ask him to do the same thing. Fortunately, I had a 1st edition player's handbook in my bag. I decided to have him sign that instead. Now, before I continue, I should give you some background on this particular book. My mother used to play DD with her younger sister's group. They would always give my mom the weakest character and kill her immediately. Not because they didn't like her, but because they wanted my mom to make them pizza. To be fair, my mom makes awesome pizza. She bought the book in hopes that they would take her more seriously. They didn't, so the book sat on the shelf for about 20 years. It was in pristine condition when she gave it to me. Back to Gen Con. I'm holding the book in my hands, and am trembling. It's my turn, and all I can manage to say is, "Thanks for the making the game book, please." Gigax says sure, and I hand him the book. When he opens it, the binding cracks. Not crack as it falls apart, but the crack of a brand new book. The corners are still sharp, the pages are crisp, and there is not a single annotation in the entire thing. Not even a name in the front cover. So there I am, 15 years old, standing in front of one of my idols. And he looks at me and says this is in really nice condition. "Did you get this here?" I replied, "Oh, no, sir, it was my mom's when she played." I have never seen someone smile like that before or since. I really wish I had had a camera. You could see the joy in his face as he flipped through the pages. I can't imagine what it must feel like to see that your creation has become an heirloom in someone else's family. When he was finished smiling and laughing to himself, he signed my book. It read, "Dear Joe, Happy Adventures, Gary Gigax, GC 2000, TLDR Happy Adventures. Mother, edit pictures." Edit 2, I'm really taken back by some of the comments. It's nice to know that this game means so much to so many other people. I pressed a button on a soda machine without putting any money in, and I got a free Minute Maid grape soda. Best grape soda I ever had. I was probably around 7 at the time. This has not happened again. Story 3, I was on a first date with a woman who volunteered at a large zoo. We met through friends, and at the time I lived 2 hours away from her. So I agreed to travel to her if she had a good idea for a first date. She decided a day at the zoo would be great, and was able to take me behind the scenes of everything. I asked, "So, how much do you feed the polar bears?" out of random curiosity. She told me the answer, and then threw in they also get marshmallows if they're good. I was surprised about this fact because I've never heard of it. So she took me behind the polar bear habitat with one of the zookeepers. It had just happened to be near feeding time. The zookeeper got a big bucket of fish and fed it to the bears. The only thing separating my date and I from the polar bears were 5 heavy vertical bars. After the fish were gone, the zookeeper took a bag of marshmallows from his pockets and tapped the bars with a large metal pole. I assumed this meant marshmallow time because a polar bear looked up like holy ITS marshmallow time and ran over to the bars. He stuck a marshmallow on the pole about 4 to 5 feet long, got it soaked in some delicious fish juices from the bucket, and fed it to him. Then he let me do it. This was the closest I've ever been to any kind of bear, and let me tell you, polar bears are freaking huge. I got him to stand up for the marshmallow. Seeing him so close was just amazing. Best first date I've ever been on. I promptly married that girl. TLDR, my curiosity taught me firsthand that the only thing polar bears love more than fish are marshmallows. My first plane ride, my sister and I were walking by the little municipal airport near my grandma's house, and a hippie-looking guy saw us looking at the planes and offered to take us up for a ride in his plane. Of course, this all could have gone horribly wrong, but it didn't. He had a little crop dusterish plane, and we went up for about 20 minutes, flying over a little town, the river, etc. It was awesome. Then we landed, and my sister and I went back to Grandma's house, and not one person believed us. Probably a good thing. Story 4, I sold memberships at a really fancy gym in LA. Our clients were either super rich or celebrities. I didn't care, though. It was Sunday night, and there were 5 minutes left in my shift, and I just wanted to get out of there that night. Of course, one guy walks in for a tour. I walk him around, go through my spiel. He mentioned he had a recording studio down the street. These people are a dime a dozen, and I just want to go home, so I don't really give a. And we get back to my office where I'm hoping he'll say he wants to think about it, and I won't have to enter all his in the computer and walk him through all the paperwork. Anyways, that doesn't happen, and he wants to join. There is no avoiding staying another half hour now. So I'll lighten up. As we're working through the paperwork, I start to make small talk. I asked him what kind of music he produced. He starts off with Liz Phair, Dave Matthews Band, and I interrupt with, "Oh, Liz Phair, I saw her on tour with Jason Mraz. Yeah. Make fun of me. I do like some Dave Matthews, but Eve been a Jason fan forever. So that's what I focused on." And he says matter-of-factly, "Oh, well, I did his last record too." Well, but to top it all off, I had been bummed because Jason was playing a couple shows in LA that sold out before I could buy tickets. The first one was that night, literally about 2 hours later. I somehow remained calm and said, "Oh, isn't he playing a show at the Wiltern tonight?" He says, "Yeah. Do you want to go? I actually haven't seen him live in a long time. It'd be good to see him," and calls up Jason's cell from my office, right there at my desk. He tells Jason to give our names to security. We finish up at the office, and the producer says he'll meet me at the show. When I get to the Wiltern, I'm taken to a side door, where I'm given a VIP lanyard pass. I meet the producer there too, and he takes me up to Jason's dressing room, where we hang out with Jason and the rest of the band till they go on stage. At that point, we all walk down together. And the producer was just going to go chill somewhere backstage, but knew I wanted to see the show, so he told me I could just stand on the side of the stage to watch. So when the band would come off while Jason did his acoustic stuff, they would just stand with me and chit-chat. It was bizarre. When the show was over, Jason played a couple encores. Then security came to him through the backstage. They walked right by me on the side of the stage, and in the mad rush, I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. But when they got to the exit, Jason stopped, left his security there, and walked back only to tell me goodbye, give me a hug, and tell me to come back anytime. Definitely one of the coolest, most random nights of my life, and taught me a valuable lesson about staying positive and maintaining an interest in people even when I'd rather be doing something else. Story 5. I live right beside the railroad tracks. One hot summer day, I got bored and wondered where they went, so I climbed up this steep grade and started walking along the tracks, just relaxing and letting my mind wander. Of course, I was watching for trains. About 20 minutes later, I hear something. I walk over to the edge of the tracks and see about a 50-foot nearly vertical drop off. At the bottom is the most beautiful creek. It was like something out of a movie. It was so picture perfect. So I slid down the hill, took off my shoes, and started walking the water. Well, the creek ran under the tracks, so when they built the railroad, they put in a tunnel. I look through the long tunnel, and on the other side is a pond. So I crawl swim through the tunnel, and on the other side, I find myself swimming in this deep pond. But I noticed something. This pond wasn't natural. Someone had built a dam in the creek to slow the flow of water and make this paradise. The shovel was still there from where they made it. They had even built a bench and a rope swing over the pond. It was the most amazing experience. I couldn't help but wonder about what had brought these people to build this place. I kept going back to this place throughout the summer and eventually followed the creek to a housing development where I stopped and turned back. I only shared this pond with a few people over the years. I consider it my little paradise, and I go there whenever I feel the world getting to me. It reminds me there is a simpler part to life and quite a bit of mystery in it too. Story 6. This was before the internet. I was a young wee lad and was taking a shower when for some inexplicable reason I started washing my penis a lot. The rest is pretty much history. Story 7 happened to my friend's brother. He was camping or hiking with a bunch of Boy Scouts. They came across a fence while exploring and hopped it and started to continue their adventure. A few minutes later, they were ambushed by serious dudes with loaded guns. The Scouts had unknowingly broken into Camp David. After a long time of questioning and verifying that they were just lost scouts, their troop was given a tour of the site. Story 8, that's an awesome story about the penguins, and let me tell you, you're lucky it went that way. When I had an internship at a zoo, I quickly realized that if you're wearing a keeper uniform and holding any kind of box, bag, etc., at least 5 people will ask you if you're going to feed something. Most of the time, we were just going to clean or fix something in their enclosure. This one woman asked the keeper and me if we were getting ready to feed the tigers. When we told her no, she got sad and said she was hoping if we were that way, let her help. My keeper gave a light chuckle and explained to her that we have to feed the tigers through metal chutes to avoid contact with the tigers. She then went on to tell us we were idiots because she's seen shows on Animal Planet and knows you can play and wrestle with tigers and they don't hurt you any. Story 9. I was at a Pearl Jam concert at Madison Square Garden. And after the show, my boyfriend and I were walking around the stadium. We saw this open door on the ground level. And because we took so long to walk around, the place was practically devoid of guards. We walked into the door, went down some stairs, through another open door, and we realized we were backstage. We thought this place was empty, but then we saw huge speaker boxes labeled with Pearl Jam stickers and stuff. We walked around the boxes some more and thought there was nothing else interesting to see. So as we made our way toward the same door, I hear a hey. I turn around and we come face to face with Eddie Vedder. We all talk for about 20 minutes, and he's a really good guy. He gave us a free subscription for the Pearl Jam 10 Club for 2 years before we left. Story 10, I was on a motorcycle ride back from my parents' house, Pennsylvania, to my house, Texas. I was passing through Kentucky, and I saw this neat little road off the highway. So I took it about 5 minutes of riding when it turns into some dense woods. I think that it might be wise to turn around, but decide to explore a few more miles. I turned down another road, and next thing I know, the entire road opened up to this beautiful grassland as far as I could see. I parked my bike and just stood there staring at it all. I was going through some hard times back then, and seeing this beautiful piece of land, just sitting there with grass swaying in the wind, completely quiet, but for the sound of nature, really made me realize that what I was going through just didn't matter. Here's the earth. Here is this rock that we sit on that floats through space. Here it is not giving what I was going through. That little patch of earth that I discovered changed me that day. Story 11, when I was 15, back in the good old days when you still could tour the cockpit in an aircraft, I was flying back to Ottawa from Calgary with a stop in Toronto. I decided to ask for a tour of the cockpit, and as I was always interested in planes and flying, got talking to the pilot and co-pilot for a long time. As we approached Toronto, I said I should head back to my seat as we would be landing soon. The pilot then suggested that I use the jump seat behind them in the cockpit and stay for the landing. He hooked me up with a headset so I could hear the air traffic control chatter and gave me a short rundown of how to land an aircraft along with a full rundown of what color of each light on the tarmac means. Needless to say, it was the best flight ever. TLDR sat in the cockpit of an aircraft when landing in Toronto. Story 12, not the best, but a weird story. Randomly struck up a conversation with a dude in a sandwich place. He asked me for $5. I gave him one. He then returned my money because he said he was testing me and gave me 2 30 gift certificates to Staples and a little baggie of weed. He said if I actually gave him 5, it meant I was but if I gave him nothing, it meant I was cold-hearted or something. The guy was pretty insane. Story 13, maybe not the best, but definitely one of the most memorable. When I was 11, my family went to Cape Canaveral and took a bus tour around the NASA Space Center. I asked the tour guide everything I could think of. How much did the space shuttle weigh? How fast could it go? How much could it carry, etc. The entire tour was basically monopolized by the curiosity of little boy. Later that day, as we were leaving a restaurant, the hostess told me that someone had left something for me. It was a space shuttle mission patch left behind by the tour guide. He took his coffee breaks at the same restaurant and remembered me. 29 years later, I still have that patch. Story 14, 3 years ago, Lollapalooza. I was too poor to buy tickets, so I figured hello to Chicago that day and just wander around the fence and hear music. I was too much of a bitch back then to try sneaking in on purpose. At one point, I saw a break in the fence and was curious where it would take me. I walked for about 5 minutes, and I start seeing people running back and forth. I was so confused. A security guard grabs me by the arm and says, "Hey, you're not allowed to be back here." And he walked me out into Lollapalooza. TLDR accidentally got backstage at Lollapalooza. Got to stay the day for free. Story 15, at the time, GF and I walked into a bar in Austin because we saw an atrium which appeared to have black lights in it. And it looked cool. We get to the atrium, and she asked me, "Did you see who was sitting at the front bar?" I responded that I didn't, and she said, "Follow me." We went and sat at the front bar, but I still couldn't see who it was, and she wouldn't tell me. This drunk guy eventually walked up to us and asked us if we saw Quentin at the bar. I said no. And he said, "Well, let me introduce you then." He took us over to where Quentin Tarantino was sitting. Ended up talking to him for 30 minutes or so. Super cool guy, great storyteller. Got a picture with him, which was a bit of a funny story too. He didn't want to do just a regular stand there and smile picture. He wanted it to look like we were standing behind him, and someone yelled his name. So now I have a picture of my ex-GF and I standing on either side of Quentin Tarantino, both smiling like idiots, and him in the middle half turn around looking surprised. Edit here is the pic. Story 16, I once bumped into a colleague who was retiring from a job I would have killed for. I casually asked who was replacing him. He asked me if I wanted the job. 3 weeks later, his boss phoned me and set up an interview. That was almost 3 years ago. I love my job. Story 17, I heard some faint music outside my house, so my buddy and I followed it for blocks. Turns out, it was a fair. We rode the Ferris wheel. The worst was when I pushed a mysterious button in a hallway as a kid. Turned out to be a live light socket. Story 18, there was a box that sat near the dumpster out behind where I live. It was there for years before I decided to open it. Inside was 27 in quarters. That was a great day. Story 19, one time, I was walking down the street in Malaysian and looked through a hole in some plywood. Suddenly, the area around the hole got punched through from the other side, and I got put in a headlock by some huge guy while his boss started speaking to me in Malaysian. He points to a briefcase at this point. I've already decided I'm going to die, and a guy opens it, revealing 3 vanilla Cokes. He picks up one and lets me taste it. Then I got pushed out of the hole, and one was handed to me. Awesome day. Story 20, I got an internship at NASA. Edit okay the story. I was at the X Prize Cup and saw a man who's tag red director for strategic business development. NASA. Now, I had never heard of this position, despite my following NASA very closely. I went up to him asking, what exactly does the director of strategic business development do? We spoke for about an hour and a half, at which point he asked me if I would be interested in interning for him. I, of course, immediately said yes. He asked for my email, and I gave it to him, never really expected to hear back. But what the hell's the worst that could happen? About 6 months later, he sent me an email saying he had arranged for me to work with one of his friends on an experimental form of propulsion at NASA Ames in California. Best summer of my life. Story 21, my brother's story. We were at DragonCon, and he was wandering around the convention area at 2 in the morning. He and a few of our friends noticed a guy carrying a pizza. Turns out, the guy was John DiMaggio, voice of Bender and Jake Adventure Time. They ended up talking to him for a while, and he did double rainbow as Jake for them. He also gave them the pizza. Story 22, I was about 14 to 15 at the time. Can't remember exactly. One night, just before going to bed, I decided purely out of the blue that I would get up at 400 to go watch the stars for a while. This was in late October, just in time for the Orionids. I had no idea. I also managed to catch very slight and weak northern lights, but northern lights nevertheless. This was at a latitude of about 47 to 48 degrees, so they don't happen very often. Story 23, I met the love of my life. Typically, I am not very forthright with women, but my curiosity got the better of me about something she had done at work. We worked together at the time, which I normally would not have questioned, and the conversation led to the most intense and satisfying romantic experience of my life. Hey, race to it being the last one as well. Story 24, I got an email account my freshman year in college and was curious about how the funky computer I was logging into worked, so I started reading the docs by running a command called man. About 15 years later, I look back and realize this led directly to a successful career in software engineering and all the wealth I could have reasonably wanted. Story 25, been working at my job about 4 months at the time. My boss had sent me a link to his personal website, so I could download some TiVo files. I get home and can't remember the name of the website. I Google his email address since I know it's on the page. Google shows his website, a few forum postings to video game websites, and at the very bottom, I see his email on by Playground Forum. A wiser person wouldn't have clicked the link. It didn't take me to his forum posting. Instead, it took me straight to his profile page. In the top left corner of the page is a picture of his junk. On the top right corner on the page is a picture of his wife's junk. That may sound like a plus, but she was not an attractive woman or in particularly good shape. Him and his wife were swingers looking for a third female to join the action. It was very awkward at work the next day. I never told him I saw the profile page. As a follow-up, a few years later he left the company and had always flirted hard with one lady at work. I got access to his email inbox when he left and noticed his last sent email was to her with an attachment. Yep, the attachment was a picture of his junk. She didn't write back to him. Story 26, it's kind of random, but because of the hobby my wife and I have, we constantly have amazing things happen to us that are awesome. We are rockhounds, so it's in our best interest to be curious. Example 1, in Mount Ida, Arkansas, doing digs for quartz crystals. It's the last day we are there Sunday, and we should drive back. We stop by a rock shop, and we still have the bug to dig after digging for the past 5 days. The lady behind the counter tells us that we can go to their quartz mine, but to keep quiet and be careful, because no one is up there to supervise, which is against some rules. We get up to the mine after driving this insane dirt road on the side of one of the mountains in the area and see that they had just dug a fresh pit along a huge quartz vein but hadn't cleaned it out yet. Ended up with dozens of the most amazing quartz clusters that we had ever found, including a huge 50-pound cluster. Example 2, wife is driving around and sees a creek bed that she wants to explore that is about 10 minutes from our house. Parts along the side of the road and starts walking along the bank of the river about half a mile and comes to a hillside that has been washed away. Sees some rocks sticking out of the hill in an unusual manner. Calls me. I grab our gear and get to her location and realize she has found a huge concentration of nodules. These nodules range in size from baseball to 60 pounds. Inside almost every nodule is some sort of fossil fragment or complete fossil that is perfectly preserved. Every time it rains, we go out and collect amazing quality ammonites, museum grade, and other various pieces of material. I could go on, but the point is, being curious is always amazing, and I can't possibly say that there's only a single thing that I could classify as the best thing ever. Rather, an entire list of amazing various things that have happened in my life that have been a result of being curious. Story 27, I found an archaeological artifact in Bath, England, that no one had ever seen before. It was carved into a stone deep inside one of the underground chambers of the baths. Pre-Roman, probably Neolithic bath has been rebuilt over the centuries. I was peeking at each stone in the wall and found the double triangle, which, because I studied mythology and archetypes for years before, I knew what I was looking at. I went over and asked the director of the group I was with if anyone had seen this before. She came running over and gasped. It was way down under amongst the stones in the wall. She actually hugged me and was so excited because no one had seen this symbol before. I knew it was the double triangle seen in many Paleolithic and Neolithic sites, what the Star of David is based on. It wasn't always a Jewish symbol. It is a double triangle found in many religions of pagan times. The concept of male and female co-joining spiritually. Anyway, that was my one find, but I was pretty smug with myself for a while. Story 28, I wondered what would happen if I set the jumpers on my motherboard for Pentium 120 MHz. When I only had Pentium 90 MHz in the socket, I independently discovered overclocking, and my Quake 2 frame rates went up almost linearly. Story 29, after my senior year of high school, I wasn't too enthusiastic about any of the art degree-oriented colleges I'd seen, so I Googled study abroad, came upon the website of a small atelier private art school based in Paris. Class size was about 10 students to 2 teachers, and consisted of drawing from a live model for 4 to 8 hours a day, as well as drawing in the Louvre during the evenings. This piqued my interest, so I sent the head guy an email expressing my passion for art and my respect for their school and their more traditional ways of teaching. He replied in an off-putting manner, and I thought that was the end of it. A couple months later, he emailed me and told me he had seen my work on Facebook and that he thought he had made a mistake by refusing me. He encouraged me to apply. I did and was subsequently accepted. However, tuition alone being 3,000 euros, not counting transportation and the rental of an apartment in Paris, plus the cost of living for 3 months the duration of the course. I reluctantly told him I couldn't accept the offer. His response paid for the plane tickets both ways and frequent flyer miles, helped hook me up with a free place to stay the entire 3 months. I only had to pay the tuition and the cost of food. I'm halfway through this program now. I'll be attending another one in the countryside in summer, with a scholarship. This experience is changing my life. LOL, I'm in Paris, cooped up on Reddit. If anyone reading this is in Paris, we should chill. Story 30, I was running back to my apartment through the pouring rain and spotted some trash a few meters out of my way in the grass. I changed course to go pick it up to throw it away. It turns out it wasn't trash. It was 520 bills folded up just sitting there. Story 31, when I was working at SeaWorld, a 10-year-old that looked a little bit slow came to me and asked if I was going to feed the penguins. I asked where his parents had told them to not let a stupid kid like that alone. His mom was kind of hot, so I let the kid play with the penguins while I played with his mom. Story 32, I occasionally played tribes with a guy who was new into being an editor at a smallish tech blog back in 2005. I was in college looking for something to do and asked if he needed an intern, spent a few years as a staff writer at the blog Gizmodo, which led me into my career as a journalist. Currently work as an editor and reporter at a major metro newspaper. So, curiosity made my career. Story 33, this will probably be buried due to the 1,000 comments, but I still feel like sharing it. It's not my story, but my dad's. He served in the army doing military intelligence in the early 1980s. Him and his men were stationed at the corner of West Germany to patrol the borders between East Germany and Czechoslovakia. He told me stories about how other groups had been assassinated in the night by the Baader-Meinhof group, and that was his biggest fear. Anyways, one night on their way back, my dad was playing techno for his men. My dad was a pretty cool guy, so they were all chatting, and my dad suggested they take a different route out of curiosity. They came across this abandoned Jeep that had a bunch of bullet holes inside. He said it looked so eerier with the moonlight reflecting, and it was in this clearing on a hill. They assumed it could be a trap, so they took their precautions so they wouldn't get killed. Once they deemed it was safe, my dad approached the Jeep from the driver's side and saw a man covered in blood, gripped the steering wheel. He was shaking with fear, and he looked close to death. My dad, speaking German, talked the man out of the vehicle and into theirs. They brought this unknown man back to the base and to the medical building. The man lived, but my dad never found out his name or why he was there or what happened to him. Either that, or he just never told me out of confidentiality. He does know that if the man was left out there for even another hour, he would have died. My dad got a medal because the man was someone important. I think he told me why when I was little, but I can't remember, and he doesn't really tell that story unless I ask him to. Either way, I think it's pretty cool. Story 34, I was walking around campus, and some students were advertising a Muggle Quidditch game between nearby schools that was going on the next day. I only was listening out of politeness, but I decided it wasn't far out of my way, and damn it, I was curious. So I went. It looked like the most fun thing ever, and I ended up starting a Quidditch team at my college, meeting a ton of people, and 3 years later, the club is still running, even though I'm not there anymore. Story 35, I got to hang out with Parappa the Rapper. I heard about a game release party by Sony in NYC. I took a bus, train, and walked down to the Bowery, only to realize the press release failed to point out it was invitation only. I walked around back, picked up a box, and helped people move instruments inside. I then hid backstage and watched the show. It turns out it was the Parappa the Rapper release party, and I spent the next 2 hours hanging out with Chop Chop Onion, Parappa, and Sunny Funny. I had brought my PSX with me, so they all signed it, and I was given a huge bag of promos by them. Best day of Aya. Story 36, well, I guess this won't mean much to most people, and am not sure it really has to do with curiosity. I'm a fail. Sorry, but a pretty famous Philadelphia big brass band performed recently at my college, and one of the band members invited me to come hang out and drink with them after the concert. None of my friends thought I should go, but how often do you get to do that? I went, had a great time, and now I'm buddies with a few of them. Story 37, I had just bought a nice but used and abused telescope off Craigslist and was still figuring it out, trying to understand alignment, collimation, and other, and was frustrated that nothing was working and was ready to quit for the night. I decided to swing it around to a bright star before packing it in. Well, it wasn't a star. I had stayed out so late that Jupiter had risen, and one of Jupiter's moons was passing in front of the planet and casting its shadow onto Jupiter. It was the most mind-blowing surprise. I quickly ran in and got a cheap webcam thing I owned and took some pictures. That was years ago, and I've been hooked on astrophotography ever since. Edit those pics from 81208 using a 99 Celestron X image and a slightly more expensive Me 12LX 200 GPS. Pics taken from San Antonio. I take much better photos now that I know what I'm doing. Story 38, I lived in downtown Denver in the mid-90s. I was across the street from two small concert halls. One night, I was studying late as I was about to finish up a degree. I thought I could hear Ministry playing, and at first I just thought it was my goth next-door neighbor. I went outside and could hear it better. Ministry had a show across the street, and I didn't know it. As I got close, my ex-roommate's psycho ex-girlfriend came out. She was too up to stay and had just been kicked out. I convinced her to give me her ticket stub, and I went inside. I managed to see a band that I was kind of a fan of for the end of their set. 20 minutes later, I was back doing homework. Story 39, well, I'm not sure if this will work out for me in the end, but getting into law school, my girlfriend was studying for the LSATs, and partially out of boredom, but also to see what it was like, I decided to take a practice one alongside her. I ended up doing really well on everything but the logic games, which are usually the ones most people actually have to study and learn for the test. I hadn't considered law school until that point, but I was kind of wavering on what to do after undergrad, and it really got me thinking about it. A couple years later, and here I am. Story 40, this is probably going to be way too deep to be read by anyone, but here it goes. About a year and a half ago, I was walking with a friend to get cigs in the middle of a party. We were a bit drunk and high at the time, and on the way back, I happened to hear some blues far away. I look at my friend, and we decide to investigate. It ends up being some old Backstreet bar, and there were two old guys and one younger one playing blues on guitar and harmonica on the porch. 2 hours later, I had a great night and learned a lot about blues. They were really good, and they told tales of places they had played at before. The younger one was an up-and-coming local artist. The place closed down a few months later.